Welcome, Rita, and I'm really excited to talk to you. I've heard about your book for quite a while now. So Rita was introduced to me by my sister Natasha, who promises that she'll show up at some time this evening. But she actually was interested in the same subject, but she writes for children, and you write for adults. And so she came to me like months and months ago and said, "You won't believe it! Somebody else is writing about the same topic." So I wanted to start with kind of like how, first of all, I think even as a prelude to that, like what was your background? Where did you grow up? And in that context, how did the story find you?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Taiwan. And while I was growing up, I heard a lot of stories. I had kind of like two paths of influence. My grandfather had this huge collection of martial arts novels. For those of you who might not know, this is a genre in East Asia where, like for example, in the U.S. we might have horror or romance. They have this genre called martial arts where it's all about these people, who like become stronger and then they have to like fight all these epic battles. So I grew up reading a lot of my grandfather's novels. And then on my grandmother's side, she used to watch a lot of period dramas about, so there were these two, I believe, Chinese empresses who seized power back in imperial China and like ruled very successfully for a long period of time. So I kind of grew up, absorbing information from those two sources. And then so I became really interested in, writing a good fight scene. And then I also became very interested in women leaders, and the way that society talks about and thinks about women leaders. And so that was really kind of how I became interested in the topic in the first place. And then at one point, I don't even remember how old I was, I came across this book about piracy in during Imperial Chinese times, and the book had like one tiny mention of this pirate queen who operated in China during the early 1800s. And the book was very dismissive of her. It was something like, oh, there was this woman, her husband was the pirate king, and she, like the implication was kind of like she helped out. She did some
Mhm,
stuff, she helped
mhm.
out. And I remember even being, as a child, even being like, is that the whole story? Or is there more here? Was there something more to her than just this woman who helped out in this fleet? And so I think that's kind of when the seed got planted in my mind.
Right. And not to jump too far ahead, but I'll jump ahead and then we can jump back. So how that's really interesting because I have just like lately been hearing more and more about her, and and the way that they talk about her now changes. So I listen, as some of these writers know, I listen to this British podcast, right? And actually two British history podcasts. One is The Rest is History, and the other one is History Hits. And on History Hits just recently, I heard they're going to do a segment on her, or they have just done. Did you know about that?
I didn't listen to it, but people told me that this thing happened. Yeah.
Right. And they position her as perhaps the greatest pirate of all time, and like you, I'd kind of heard little snippets about her. I actually used to run a publishing company at one point that did nonfiction for children. And we did series of books like looking at women in history from a different point of view. So we had one series called The Dastardly Dames, and I thought she would make like an excellent dastardly dame.
She
So
would.
yeah, but it was really interesting that the kind of perspective on it has changed. So I'll come back and ask you about that more. But it's so interesting that when you first encountered her, it was just this little kind of tucked away. And how long ago was that?
This would have been in the either late 80s or early, I mean, that's giving away my age, but that's fine. Late 80s or early 90s, I would say.
Uh-huh. And don't worry, my first book came out in 2003. You got nothing to worry about. So how you been writing up to then, or or did this like inspire you to write for the first time?
No, I actually came to writing a little. I mean, I was fascinated by the story, but you can be fascinated by a story without wanting to do anything with it. You can just kind of be like, oh, this is a fun fact to stow away in the back of my head. And but I didn't actually start writing seriously until I was in my late 20s. Because prior to that, I had been in a PhD program for clinical psychology, and so I worked for. I was in the program for 6 years, and then after that, I was working full time as a psychologist. And so I kind of always just told myself that I didn't have, what it took to write, that I didn't have the ability, that I didn't have the dedication. And then finally, I got to a point in my, I mean, the timing is fuzzy, but like I would say late, like maybe 29, 30, something like that, where I realized that I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't actually give it a shot. Like I've always loved reading. Like I said, I devoured my grandfather's entire collection of novels, and I was like 8. I was really young. Honestly, I shouldn't have been reading any of that stuff because there was a lot of violence. But so yeah, I've always loved books. But I didn't think I could do anything in the field until I think I was a little bit more mature as a person, and I finally, I kind of like in my early 30s, I decided, all right, I'm gonna let myself do this because I think the consequences would be too disastrous if I didn't.
Well, I'm really glad you did.
Thank
And
you.
so when you did, though, it was automatic that this would be the story. That, or was it?
No, no, I wrote many, many short stories before I attempted a novel because I was like, I didn't feel ready to write a full-blown novel. But then at some point I was like, okay, this is it. This is we're gonna do this now.
Right. And then and at that time, did you like think, okay, well, it could be this story or this story, or did you just go, that one has been like bothering me for
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah. I would say that the once the idea came to me that I should write a novel about her, it like I kind of locked in. Like it just became this single-minded obsession sounds a little bit extreme, but it did feel like that at times where, I was, I was doing so much research into her and the world that she lived in. I had all like these books and references, and I I just couldn't stop myself from reading more and more
Hmm.
about that world. And so after a certain point, it felt like the bus was driving itself. Do you know what I mean? Like it was
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I actually, because I also write historical fiction, I actually love that part. I love the immersion. It's like sometimes it just feels like an excuse to read, and who knows whether the book's ever going to come, you know? But now, what I think is really difficult, though, in historical fiction, and difficult also in memoir for similar reasons, is that you have all of these facts that you want to, incorporate, but you need to find that one emotional arc, that one angle, or that one theme, that one thing that you want to say that's going to carry you through the book. And
Absolutely.
so I was wondering for you, I mean, I know that you open at the moment of a sword strike. So I'm just going to quickly fill anybody in the room who doesn't know what this book is about. It's about a pirate, a female pirate in the South China Sea in the early 1800s, and how she actually takes over this huge, like, pirate nation almost, right? An armada, a pirate armada, and is like this incredibly powerful woman at a time when nothing in society said that this should have been able to happen. Um, and and Rita, you choose to open that book at a sword strike at the moment that her husband is almost cleaved in two. So, and that said to me very quickly that we're gonna that we're gonna come at this story from the angle of like a woman thrust into a man's world and have and like this immediate wrestle for power and for autonomy. But I also know from writing historical fiction, at least if you're anything like me, that it could have been like 100 things. Yeah. So how did you choose how to get into it?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. So something that I knew from the very beginning was that I didn't want to start with her as a child. And the reason is because I think it's too easy for all of us to sympathize with children. Do you know what I mean? Children are innocent, right? They are victims of their circumstances. They are, they generally are people that audience or readers will root for, generally speaking. And I was trying to walk a very fine line with this particular character where I wanted people to feel some sympathy toward her and where she had come, and what had happened to her. But at the same time, I didn't want to exculpate her of her crimes. Do you know what I mean? Like I think she did a lot of really horrible things. There were a lot of kidnappings, there were a lot of murders, and I was afraid that if we started, if we went chronologically, if we started with her as a child and then followed her throughout her life, that we would spend too much time with her at the beginning as a child, and we would start to sort of rationalize away the terrible things that she ended up doing. And so that's why I chose to begin with that moment of her, and why that specific moment of her as an adult is because I very much wanted the novel to be about her leadership
Hmm.
and not about her, how she behaved under her husband's leadership. So I don't think this is a spoiler because it's literally on the first page of the book, but her husband, the Pirate King, dies on the very first page. And so I wanted the moment of his death to be a clear marker of the beginning of her reign
Hmm.
as leader of the Armada. And that's why I chose to start it in that particular. I hope that answers the question.
No, that did answer the question. It raises another question for me, though, which is that, one way is one thing is the angle in, the other uh, kind of decision that has to be made when you're writing a book is like, what is your central message and your central theme? And I was wondering how your theme, like you said, you were thinking carefully about wanting to make sure that we don't, you know, basically wave a magic wand and forgive her for all her sins. But what did you want to achieve? Like, and how did you decide that that is what you wanted to achieve? And I'm asking you this,
Mhm.
um, having come from just finishing a novel where I think I changed my mind about 5 times as to what that novel was about. First it's about belonging, then it's about emancipation, then it's about, so how did
Mhm.
you settle on what your book was about?
Yeah, I think that, so for me, pretty early on, it was clear that this was a novel about power. That it is about the complicated ways in which people in general wield power, the price of power, the I don't know how to put this, the ways in which not power creates a need for itself. That the more power you have, the more you're convinced that you need more, even more power beyond that to keep your position. So there's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy in there. So I wanted this to be about power, but you can do that with a historical novel about anyone, regardless of gender. And so I then decided to kind of go in a little bit more and look at women in, like how women wield power, and is it actually that different? What are the differences and similarities in the ways that women wield power compared with male leaders. So I think that's kind of how I arrived at.
Was that something that you studied or kind of noticed in your clinical psychology?
Yes, but also I think I just, I mean, I don't want to bring up any sort of, I don't know how you all feel about political topic. Like, I was born and raised in Taiwan, and those of you who are kind of familiar with the political situation here is that there's been a lot of ongoing tension with China for many decades now, and in recent years it has become even more activated. And so I think I'm just kind of always thinking about like where is the power in any given situation, and how does it change hands, and how does it flow, and what are the ways in which it can be bolstered, or I mean it's hard to explain, but I think I just a funnier anecdote I would say is just as a kid, there was a time that I wanted to be class president, and I've told this story in other groups before, but at the time this was in the mid '80s in Taiwan. The teacher I submitted my self nomination for class president, and the teacher pulled me aside after class and was like, you can't do that. Girls can't be class president. You can be vice president. Yeah, no, this was true. She was like, girls can't be vice president, but you can be vice president. We can elect one of the boys as as the class president, and then you can be vice president. And I got so angry at hearing that I was being denied this potential position because of
Right.
gender, that I actually ended up getting several of my classmates to sign a petition to get to get the teacher to change her mind. So I as somebody who as a kid was a little bit interested in power, I think this is also just something that influenced me.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. I totally that really resonates with me. I remember at one point after I started my publishing company with all these books about women in history, that an interviewer asked me whether how I felt about having founded a feminist press. And I think I was like, feminist press? I was really, a little surprised that that's what, he thought that I'd done, because that message that girls can just do whatever they want is just so deeply rooted in my outlook in life, that of course anyone can do whatever they want if they try hard enough. And so yeah, it's nice to hear that it's led to this book and to your drive for this very, like you said, very complicated heroine. I'm going to actually, I'm going to stick to the plan, but I'm eager to read a part of your book to everyone that I really enjoyed. So I wanted to ask you about research though, because we were talking about like all the pros and cons of writing historical fiction and all the challenges. And one of the challenges is handling kind of where you want to land on that on the gradient between nonfiction and fiction, right? Because it's like the sliding scale. Like Hilary Mantel said that in her opinion, if you're writing historical fiction, you have a responsibility to your readers that everything that can be checked out will check out. And I don't actually adhere to that. I think that I write fiction for some of the freedom it gives me. And so I deal with it in my author's note. I tell everybody what's right and what's wrong. So where did you land on that? And was it a difficult decision? Was it a conscious decision how much you would fictionalize and how much you would hold true? How did you make those decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think in my mind I distinguish between truth with a capital T and truth with a lowercase t. And I do think it is the job, even if you're writing fiction, I do think it is incumbent upon novelists to write with a capital T truth, But I think the lower T truths, like what specific day a battle happened, or, like did the battle happen, like slightly southwest or slightly south, like I think those types of details I tend to play a little bit fast and loose
Hmm.
with, because as you said, like people have written actual nonfiction, dissertations about this woman. They don't need to read, people don't need to read my novel to learn about her life. They have actual scholarly sources that, were vetted by dissertation committees. So if you're reading my novel for like to get a specific day or time or the name of a type of ship, right, you're not going to get that. But I do think that I am trying to tell the larger T truth, the capital T truth, of what it was like to be a woman during those times, and what it was also like to be a peasant during those times, because a lot of the novel has to do with all of these struggles and eventual crimes that a lot of these poor fisher folk went through as a result of unfair government policies that overtaxed them, that like told them that all of the food that they grew had to be exported as opposed to kept for themselves. And so the larger sociocultural capital T truths, I definitely wanted to get right. But yeah, don't take my word on, if I say she was in a three-masted ship and it was actually a four-masted ship, go with the historian on that. Don't go with me.
I was actually going to ask you about your ships because there are lots of fight scenes, as you say. There are lots of like sea battles, and there's like seamanship all over the place. And I was wondering, because we know now that a lot of the fighting was like in your bones from reading those martial arts novels. I was also wondering whether came from a sailing family or something like that. You know what I mean? Just-
That's really funny. Somebody actually did ask me, it was a bookstore I found, where somebody was like, do you have any pirates in your family?
Huh.
If I did, you would never stop hearing about it. Like I would just like that. That's what I would open. Hi, I'm Rita. By the way, did you know I come from a family of pirates? Anyway, but no, I don't have any. I don't have any sailors in my family. All of that research was like real. It was a doozy because I kind of had to learn a completely new argot for
Right.
this world I had no idea about. No idea about. But sorry, what was the question besides just
You just answered it. You just
what's
answered.
that?
Yeah, I said you just answered it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, really just wondering like how close you were to like, I don't know, dyed in the wool sea knowledge,
No, no, I
There you
wish,
go.
I wish. I get seasick. That's how.
That's how loosely connected you are. So what, apart from then having to learn this entire, I don't know, I mean, I have a friend who, actually more than one friend, I have a few friends who are just like real boat, yachty, you know, like not posh yachty. They work as crew for posh people, but
Mhm.
but they just like live and breathe boats and ships and moving things and from one part of the world to the other. So I fully understand that that is like a whole way of looking at the world that is so foreign to us landlubbers. What other challenges did you find in your research that was particularly easy or particularly hard? I always, every time I used to research nonfiction, I would always be surprised at what a hole there is. Like, I think that before you actually get into it, you always assume that whatever you want to find, you'll be able to find, and there's a whole story out there. But a lot of times there just is not. So, what were your challenges in doing that?
So I think the first challenge was language, right? So there isn't as much in the English language about, and for very understandable reasons, right? Like, why would there be a lot of sources in English about Chinese maritime culture in the early 1800s. It's such a niche area that so when I first started the research process, I realized quickly that I would need to try to find original language sources to make it a little bit easier on myself. So I ended up spending about a year in Taiwan because Taiwan's so close to China. It's absorbed a lot of its kind of maritime and spiritual cultural practices. So I spent a year in Taiwan delving into Chinese language sources about all of these things, and it was easier once I got there because you know they actually built a life-sized replica of a junk ship, and it's like sitting in Tainan. Like you can go there, you can climb aboard the ship, you can like crawl around and get a sense of what it would be like to live on one of these ships for months at a time. And so but yeah, the initial hurdle was a little bit difficult because of the language barrier.
Mhm. And once you got to those primary sources in the Chinese language, did they pretty much fill in all the holes, or were there huge sections of her life that you couldn't find? And also, how contradictory were they? Like all these sea battles, for instance, did everyone agree that they happened on the same day on the same patch of sea, or?
So yeah, so there are kind of two answers to that. So with regard to things like battles and ships and maritime culture, historians are pretty much in agreement. With regard to her,
Mhm.
there's like very so in a way I benefited from the fact that I had a bunch of information about the world, but I didn't have a lot, like there isn't a lot of documented history about her, right? Like most of the sources in which she was mentioned, it was like that kind of like, yeah, she was a pirate, she ruled, and then that's kind of all the information that you get, which made it easier for me to actually fictionalize her life because I actually think that if there were like multiple biographies written about her, that it would actually make it harder for me to write the novel. It would have made it harder for me to write the novel because the whole time I would be getting stuck on, okay, but she was friends with this person, but she wasn't friends with this,
Mhm.
and so this freed me up to focus on things like making up her relationships and her friends and her enemies and her personal interests and belief systems, because those things weren't mentioned by the history books, I could go wild.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, like stuff that could be very easily falsified. Like again, like she sailed in a junk ship. There's no way she sailed in like a Western, like brig or something like that. See, I've like now forgotten all of the words. There's a word I'm looking for, ship, but anyway, a nautical term I'm looking for that I've completely forgotten. But those things I didn't feel as free to lie about, basically.
Mhm. Mhm. And in doing your research, was there like any particular great like finding or fun moment that you had when researching this book? Like,
I mean, I got super into writing about the weapon because again, I grew up reading my grandfather's novels. I got super into writing about the novels, about the weapons in the novel, to the extent that at one point my editor came back to me and she was like, "We do not need all of this." Like there was like a one-page description of a particular weapon. She's like, "Who's gonna read this? Who's gonna be interested in this?" And so like in my response to her, I was like, "Okay, too nerdy, got it." So like I deleted the whole thing because I recognized in retrospect that it was way too much information about a
right,
weapon for
right.
the average reader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did she, yeah. So I think that that's another challenge of historical fiction. Most of the time, the people who write it, they're history buffs. and they're nerds. Like I'm a total history nerd. So I want to just put all this really neat stuff down on the page, and then yeah, and then someone has to go, no, should
No, no, this
yeah,
is not
not
important.
really part of the story. But, oh, that's fun. I bet you the seeing the junk was fun too. I actually read about that junk and how they sailed it, right? They didn't they do
I think they
quite a long kind of test voyage to.
I think they were planning to take it for a test voyage, and then I think it never happened. I'm
Oh,
not sure because if you go to Tainan today, it's still sitting there. It's just like sitting there in a park
couldn't they have
on land.
saved it and
It's
then put it
very
back?
weird.
Okay, so then, all right, you did your research, you're writing this book, you know, uh, hadn't done it before. You'd been a clinical psychologist. So what was your writing life and your writing community like at that time, before you were published and when you were still working? Had you found your way into some writers groups, met writing friends, or were you working pretty much on your own?
No, I was fortunate enough to. So first of all, I did take a break and get an MFA so that you know, excuse me, so that gave me access to a small writing community, just like some of the classmates that I kept in touch with after the MFA was over. But yeah, I was living a double life kind of. I was working as a psychologist during the day, and then on evenings and on weekends, I would put all of my time into writing, and so for a number of years, yeah, it felt like I had two. I didn't, but it felt like I had two full-time jobs.
Mhm.
Uh, and eventually, it got to the point where I was like, okay, I think I can start tapering down in terms of my work as a psychologist, and I'm very thankful that the book was accepted for publication
Mhm.
shortly after that, so that I could just
Wait,
transition.
wait, 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 wait. You just zoomed past the stories
Okay,
of
what did I move past? Sorry.
yeah, you just zoomed straight to, oh, and then I was published. This whole room are very interested in
Okay.
slowing down this piece.
Okay.
So you got your MFA, you had some writing friends, you finished your book. Okay, how did you find your agent?
Okay. All right. Yes. So, um, so yeah, I there's a thing for those of you who don't know about this. I actually tell everybody about this all the time. There's this thing at AWP every single year called writer to agent. Some
Mhm.
of you may have heard of this already. Some of you may have not. But it basically allows you, instead of writing multiple query letters, and like because normally you have to send a personalized query letter to every single agent that you're trying to reach out to. The writer to agent is a kind of much more consolidated experience where you just write one generic query letter
Mhm.
and then you shoot it out to all of the agents that are participating in the AWP writer to agent program. And if they are interested, they will contact you and then you will meet with them at the next AWP
Mhm.
conference. So that is what I did. I shot out a query letter along with some pages of my manuscript, and my lovely agent, Michelle, contacted me and said, hey, let's chat. So we did, and I sent her the full, and that's how I ended up finding an agent.
That's great. And was she the only one who requested your folds?
There
Oops. I think you're slow. Your connection's slowing down. Oh, oh no, we've lost her.
I just got bounced out too, Sharon, so I think that must be something wonky with the internet.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't. Sorry about that.
oh.
What was I saying? Um,
We were asking, you about whether your agent, who you found through Writer
oh
to Agent, whether you
yeah.
had met other agents as well in the same process.
Yes. So I had a few conversations with two other agents with so because I had gotten a few of my short stories published before the novel, a couple of agents had reached out basically and said, "Hey, are you working on anything longer?" And so I was talking to two other people. And by the way, this is just I hope this is good advice to folks, but like when you are considering, when you're trying to decide between agents, it's very, very important to get a sense of what they would want to change about your manuscript before you decide to sign with the agent. Because you just, like if you, I know that like when before you're agented, you're like doing everything you can just to get an agent, but you really need to make sure that it's going to be a good fit between you and the person who, to whom you're talking. Because, let's say you're writing something and you have a very clear sense of what this thing is, and the agent's like, no, this is what I want you to, I see a lot of potential in this manuscript, but I think you should do X, Y, and Z to it, and you completely disagree with X, Y, and Z. It's just going to make for a very, combative relationship. And so, yeah, I had been talking to a couple of other agents, but I felt like Michelle's vision for my career was much closer to what I actually wanted than what a couple of the other people were saying. So I decided to go with Michelle.
Oh, that's great. So you chose Michelle, signed your contract. What was the submission process like?
What was the what?
The submissions process? Like,
well, I mean, so first we worked on the novel for like another year and a half before,
with you and Michelle.
Yeah, because Michelle is a very hands-on agent, and this is another thing that you would want to consider, right? Like, do you want an agent who's very hands-off, or do you want an agent who like really gets into the manuscript with you? Different people just have different preferences, but Michelle is a very hands-on agent, and so we worked on that novel for another, again, I want to say year and a half before she actually decided it was ready to go out on submission. So. Yeah.
And how was that process for you? Like, so you had chosen her because you thought that her vision for the book was kind of in line with yours. But frankly, I used to work at least as a dev editor, and I encounter writers often who are just I think like I would call it like psychologically like resistant to change. You know what I mean? It's not like what is changing that is bothering them so much as that their feelings are a little hurt. They're a little surprised that this much change is necessary. So I think that, it's interesting to hear from someone who went through it, who went, at the point where, a lot of people in this room will be so excited just to find that agent, sign the agent, have the agent say yes, and then to be faced with the fact that your agent is still like, you're still not there yet, you're still working a year and a half later, to get submitted. I think it's a really good lesson. Like, so, but was that easy from the start? Did you have to ease yourself into it? Sometimes I tell myself when I get edits back, I tell myself I have to do mental yoga, mental yoga, don't react, be calm, be calm. So, but how did you handle it?
Yeah, look, it still continues to be a little bit sore, like it's always, we put so much work, like all of us writers, right? We put so much of our time and energy into these things that I think it's impossible to not be a little bit sore when people come back. I was talking to Lee Kravitz, a fellow writer recently, and he was saying that like, whenever he gets a editorial, so your agent sends you this thing called like the editorial letter or the letter where it's like, and it's not like 1-page letter, it's like a 10, he says whenever he gets feedback from his agent and it's like 10 pages, he has to like put it away for like weeks before he can re-engage with the letter and actually think rationally and unemotionally about what needs to be changed. And I think I am similar. Like I just sent in, a few months ago, I sent in a draft of my second novel to my agent, and my agent was like, "Oh my God, this is so, I'm really excited. This book has so much potential. I can't wait to submit. Also, here are 10 pages of notes," right? And that is just how it works in the writing industry. You're gonna get 10 pages of notes from your agent, and then you're gonna get 10 pages of notes from your editor, the editor if your book gets accepted, and then you're gonna get like 10 pages of, 10 additional pages of notes from your editor after that. So I think unless you are very, very emotionally strong and you don't feel any anxiety or sadness at all when you get these letters, I think it's important to just kind of figure out your own self-care routine. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe you read the letter once and then like Lee, put it away for like 2 weeks before you re-engage with it. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, you do have to just kind of figure out a way to cope with the constant feedback from the people that presumably you're working with because you trust.
Right. My personal trick, just for everyone in this room, is I pretend that it's just an experiment. Like, it's just an experiment anyway. I'm just trying it out, and then I'll try it out, and then I'll throw it in a drawer. And then when I come back to it, invariably, I'll think they were all my ideas in the first place. And that was great. I was so clever to have figured that out.
I think that's a great strategy. Yeah.
But so then 18 months later, you're now on submission. So how did that go? Like, what was that like for you?
I mean, yeah. So I was very lucky in that the submission process was not dragged out for me. I do know that I've heard some horror stories of people who had to wait months and months to hear back from everyone. So we submitted the manuscript on a Tuesday, I believe, and then like Friday or Saturday, like the editor, the one who ended up buying the book, she emailed my agent on, I think, a Sunday. She emailed my agent like on a Sunday outside of work hours. Don't give anybody else this book yet. Don't give it, And so I was fortunate in that we had some strong interest in the book within a week of the submission process. And then my agent did what she worked her magic from that point forward.
That's great. And do you know if it was like a wide submission, or whether she targeted just a couple of editors that she thought would be especially good for you, or?
No, it was a wide submission. So we submitted to, I want to say 30 different editors. And once we got a few very strongly interested editors, then I believe Michelle then reached out to the ones who hadn't responded yet to be like, okay, this is going to be going out the door soon. So
right.
less chance. Yeah.
Did you end up in an auction situation?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And are you at liberty to tell us how many bidders?
Yes, I'm trying. Okay, so there was Bloomsbury who ended up getting the book. I'm not going to name the other ones, but there was, I want to say 4 or 5.
Great. That must have been so exciting.
Yeah, no, well, it was, yeah. Well, after the first few days of being convinced that nobody was ever going to want my book and that I would just, that I should just retire it to the bottom of my drawer for the rest of my life, it was, it was nice to get a little bit of validation.
So, but why did you feel that? Because it happened so quickly. Like, was it just angst the moment you released it? The moment
I can torture myself about anything. I'm pretty sure all writers can torture themselves about anything if they set their minds to it. No, but yeah, again, it went out on a Tuesday. So, and we did we finally heard from somebody on that Sunday, but like, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's 5 days to leave me alone with my thoughts. That's a bad idea.
That's really funny. I actually recently just sold my novel too, and I was
Congratulations.
also in an auction situation.
Congratulations.
And so my particular angst was at a certain point I was saying to my agent, I was like, well, but kind of like, well, we don't, they've said that they're bidding, but like they could still not bid, right? And I remember she just looked at me and she just went, anything can happen in this world, but I don't think that's going to be one of them.
I That's so funny because I actually said something very similar, not the exact same thing, but I said something very similar to my agent, and my agent also had that response of just not what? Like she was so confused by my
I,
question.
I think that sometimes these agents must just sit around going, wow, like like what class of people have we decided to work with as
Yeah.
clients? Because so much anxiety. But anyway, so talking about anxieties, did anyone in the course of the submission process tell you that historical fiction was hard to sell? Because
Oh yeah. Mhm.
what did you hear?
Again, I won't name any names, but I heard from somebody. God, I'm trying to find the exact way that this person phrased it. It was something along the lines of, "This just doesn't feel like anything that this doesn't feel like something that I work with, or this doesn't feel like something that I see in the market. Some combination of words that amounted to meaning that." And I mean, I remember because I was, this was before I had signed with Michelle. I was devastated. I was like, what did I write all this for if there is no room in the market for something like this? Um, so I'm glad that she wasn't right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that your book has proven them wrong. So you were published by Bloomsbury.
Mhm.
Congratulations. Very,
Yeah.
very nice publisher. What was your launch experience like? Did they give you all the support that you were hoping for? Did they put you out on a book tour? Like, what was your experience?
Yeah, so Bloomsbury was great. I did go on a book tour, and all of the stories, both nice and horrible, that people hear about book tours are true, which is that on one hand, sometimes you get to meet these really lovely people who are like really excited about your book, and they want to chat with you. And then sometimes you're like, what if nobody shows up? Because especially when you're going to a city like my book launch was in San Francisco, which is, my home base. And so that I felt pretty comfortable, right? Because I'm like, I have friends here, I have neighbors and coworkers, and like I know that it's not going to be an empty house. But I went to some cities where I had no connections whatsoever, and I was just crossing my fingers that, like, I was like, if like 5 people can show up, I will, you know what I mean? Like I will feel like this would not have been a waste.
Hmm.
So yeah, but they were very nice. They sent me out on book tour. They they were able to help me get Indie Next and the Barnes Noble Discover. So that was all just wonderful.
Hmm. And on this whole tour, like, what was your, actually not even the tour, it's just the whole experience from beginning to end. What was like the biggest surprise to you? Like, what do you wish that you'd known earlier that you know now?
I think that I would know better. I hope that I don't. I mean, it's been a couple of years, but I also don't know if I've like grown that much since then. I feel like I feel like I need to get better at not caring so much about sales. Do you know what I mean? Like I remember in the days leading up to the book launch, and then the week after, because the first week after book launch, that's like if you're going to make it onto a bestseller list, which I didn't, but if you're going to make it onto a bestseller list, then that is most likely the week that you're going to do it, because most books, the attention peters off after that, right? I was obsessively checking like my sales rank on Amazon. I was obsessively, and I don't think that's a good idea for any writer to do. And so, yeah, if my second novel comes out, then I think the one lesson that I'm going to have to take away from the previous experience is don't check these things, because first of all, you're not going to checking it is not going to change the results. So like, why are you doing this to yourself? So
Mhm. Was sales like kind of like your measure of success all along? Like, did you?
no, but it felt like, because the book went to auction,
Mhm.
I felt pressured to produce a certain, I was, you know, I was always like the A student in class, like I have this like very unhealthy, deeply ingrained need to make other people happy. That, like, and I know it's not healthy, and I'm trying to kind of disavow that, but no, like I very much felt like I owed it to everybody who had worked on the book to give them the sales that they wanted, and I don't think that's a great way to
Right.
live as a writer. So
So you actually felt obligated to your editor and to your agent and to like that you should be the success that they had kind of backed you to be in a way by giving you the sale.
yeah, I mean, because like ultimately that's how publishers make money, right? I mean, like I do understand that there's this whole thing about like, publishers have like these one, two people who make like them billions of dollars, and then everybody else, fails to meet that mark.
Mhm.
So I do understand that publishers have their own sort of calculus in terms of what keeps the industry afloat. But I felt I was giving myself a lot of pressure to somehow meet their desires and expectations. And
Mhm.
I want to be clear, none of them made me feel that way. Like this, it's not like they were looking at me being like, hey, we need you to, give
Right.
us Times bestseller. So I want to be clear, this is not them. This is entirely me and my own anxiety uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
about my career. So
Mhm.
yeah,
And so when you signed, actually, I didn't ask you, did you sign like a single or a two book deal or
no, it was just the one book.
so are you this next book, which is the next thing I want to ask you about, is it also historical fiction that you're writing?
No, it's actually, I am taking a journey into speculative fiction.
Oh,
So it's going to
wow.
be, it's very weird and very different. So
Oh, how fun.
yeah.
That's great. And Michelle's excited about it. I think that Bloomsbury, I don't know how well Bloomsbury is known for spec fiction, so you might be also maybe finding a new editor as well. What are your plans at this point?
I mean, I don't really have, because we're still working on the revision. So I think it's kind of,
Right.
I'm trying to not think too far ahead. I'm just trying to
Mhm.
get the revisions done.
Yeah,
I'm sure
excellent
Michelle
choice.
has her own ideas about what needs to happen
Right.
next. So I'm gonna leave it up to her.
Right. And so where did the spec fiction story where did this find you?
Um, I think that so I've always also read a lot of speculative. I mean, if you think about it, martial arts novels are kind of speculative fiction
Mhm.
because there are literally people flying over treetops. Like
Right.
like if you watch like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that's kind of like it's people flying over treetops and people being able to like
Get energy
use their
come out of the
chi.
palms of their hands. I
Exactly.
remember that when I was
And
a kid.
exactly. And so I've always, my grasp on reality has always been a little bit tenuous. And so I decided that I wanted to write something that was not fully of this world.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's kind of what happened.
Oh, That's great. And we wish you all the luck with it. And I also just have one last question that's not connected to anything, but I noticed that you said that you're taking a break from social media.
Mm.
Can you talk a little bit about your use of social media in the launch of this first book? And did did you like it? Did you not like it? Why are you taking a break from it?
Yeah, I mean, well, so first of all, social media, I'm sure all of you have experiences with this yourself. Social media is complicated, right? Like there's a lot of, it can suck up a lot of your time if you're not being very, very judicious about it. And I personally have two modes. I have like an outward, a public facing mode where I'm like, chatting with people and, posting like teasers and da, da, da. And then there's the writer mode, which is I just kind of want to be left alone to be able to focus on my thing. And because I'm working on the second novel, I'm very much in writer mode. And so right now, if like I'm really trying to not I'm basically trying to conserve energy so
Mhm.
that instead of spending it on social media, I can spend it on this next project. So that's really all there is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I was interested because there's so many different not only like methods and and attitudes and strategies, but there's just also very basically, I think, between human beings different levels of enjoyment of this thing called social media. So as a lot of my writers know, I'm absolutely horrendous at it. It's like one of my writers sent me I wonder whether she's on tonight actually. She sent me a message saying, "Oh, your Insta is rocking it," she said. And I I kind of like messaged her back. I said, "What?" I said, "Because I post the covers of books, the people that I might be talking to, and photos of flowers." And then five people on the planet see it. It's like, what am I rocking exactly? It was so funny because anyway, just not my cup. And I was wondering how it played in with you, and especially because you and I are in the same genres, like whether you some genres have such a strong social media presence for those particular readers, right? And I was wondering, in actually, I'll just ask you this as a question. In historical fiction, have you found that the readership is there online often, or are they more often stuck in big books?
I mean, so I don't really know how to answer that question because I'm not on all of the social media platforms. So the ones that I am on, I'm on Instagram and I'm on Blue Sky. So I don't know how generalizable those two particular platforms are. Like I know that there's a huge TikTok, what it was, it's called Book Talk or something. There's a huge
Right.
market there, but because I'm not on it, I can't really speak knowledgeably about
Mhm.
what the readership is like. So, I mean, I will say that on Instagram, it is nice to see, people will post really nice photos of like them with your book, holding up the cover. Like when Barnes and Noble picked my book for their Discover pick, it was so cool because like all of these individual Barnes and Nobles across the country had set up displays of my book. Do you know what I mean? And so like
Mhm.
it was really cool to be able to share like, this is, I'm making this up, Barnes and Noble's Yonkers, and this is Barnes and Noble's like whatever. And like this is the way that they chose to showcase my book. So Instagram is really great for for the visuals, obviously. But yeah, like I don't know, maybe if I were on Book Talk, I would be meeting a completely different readership. But
Mhm. No. Um, okay, so I'm going to open up to the floor so that everybody can ask their questions. We usually have some interesting questions from our writers. And oh, hands are going up already. But before I do that, everyone, I wanted to, please indulge me. I wanted to read back to you a part of your book that I completely enjoyed. And I enjoyed it because everyone, this is a very gruesome scene, but it is a gruesome scene where you see no gore. And I thought it was just so well done. So here, um, she says, I'll start here. It was true that such a tactic occasionally produced false accusations. Sometimes people sprouted random names out of fear or confusion. A magistrate would have to spend a lot of time separating the innocent from the guilty. But she wasn't a magistrate. She was just angry and so tired. She gathered the crew of her ship. The 19 heads, blackened by their own blood and the blood of their compatriots, were cannonballs tumbling aft. Even if they hadn't been working with Pak Ling, they'd been fomenting unrest. One had to bring them their complaining to a swift end. One simply had to. She shook out her arms. She didn't like ordering others to make kills that were her responsibility. It turned killing into an idea, and it was easy to get comfortable with ideas. Tell the others what, tell the other ships what you saw today, she told the crew. And with that, Rita had lopped off 19 heads. So congratulations. I thought that that was like a passage for me that really jumped out. It's so hard, I think, to, I don't know, just to show some of this without having to be gratuitous about it. So I congratulate you on doing writing a very violent and action-packed book, and yet it's like deeply psychological. So congrats. And so let's start with these raised hands. So Monica McKinney, you're first. You're still muted.
There we go. Hi. Thank you, Rita, for coming and talking with us. It's been really interesting to hear it because I didn't realize that it was an actual person that you were talking about. And I was actually quite surprised at how many women were involved in piracy. And I assume that that was part of your research. But the thing that I am wondering about, as I'm reading it, there's a lot of interiority in this, I thought, which I thought was interesting. And then there's the action part of it. But you roll out the story that ends up getting, like, not until maybe the second half, all of the political stuff. We've been getting, it's been seeded in the beginning, and then we start getting the political stuff. And I'm wondering why you made that choice. What you were trying to do with, especially since said you're really interested in the politics. And so I would have been really tempted to just start right out with that.
Yes. So the reason that the first half is really about her consolidating, or I very much wanted the first half to be about her consolidating power, because we know from history that regime changes, power transitions, that tends to be when most things go wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like either the transition happens smoothly, or this is usually when wannabe usurpers, right? This is when aspiring usurpers usually step in. And so I felt like it would be too easy if it was just like, oh, well, her husband is dead. Now it's her fleet. Like that would feel contrary to everything history has taught us. And so I very much wanted to focus on this really unstable transition period, this very unstable exchange of power, and how she ends up navigating that. And I just felt like I couldn't focus on both that and all of this other political stuff at the same time without glutting the first half of the book. So that's kind of how it ended up happening.
Thank you. Karen Fitzgerald.
Thank you. And thank you, Rita. Thank you both, Sharon and Rita. Um, my question is this. After you finished going through as many uh, edits and changes and fulfilling everybody else's requests for what they wanted, did it still feel like your book? Were you, did it feel the same to you when it came out on the shelf?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thankfully it did. So because I felt like Michelle had a very good, Michelle is a really good agent because she will give you substantive feedback, but also she is very comfortable with letting you be your weirdest, truest self. Do you know what I mean? Like she's very used to how weird I am. And so I never felt like she was trying to turn the novel into something that it wasn't. And and likewise with my editor Grace, it felt very clear to me before the auction even that she had a very that she understood what I was trying to do with the book, and that she wanted to help me make the book the best version of what I wanted it to be, if that makes any sense. And so I never felt like anybody tried to hijack the process. So I was very fortunate in that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to add a little something to that, Karen, because I coach a lot of writers, and this is something they struggle with often. This idea that if you do the edits and you take the changes and you take the notes, somehow it ends up being kind of less of your book. And I think the analogy that helps me is I often think of it because I love to drive. Like everyone who knows me knows that I love cars and I love driving. But I think that every writer, no matter how good a writer, is a car without a rear view mirror, without rear view and wing mirrors. And so it's not that you drive any differently or it's not your car, it's just that you're driving better. You can see better because otherwise there's no writer who can see their own work completely. You just don't have the distance. So so if you think of it that way, that they're only helping you do what you want to do, but you need them to do it because you don't have the ringers without it, then you kind of get closer to what the relationship really is like if you're working with the right people.
That's such a great metaphor. I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Karen Voorhees, what's your question?
Hi. First of all, thank you, both of you. I love hearing stories that have happy endings. And sounds like this story is still going on, but I hope it continues to have happy endings. And then, Shirin, I just have to add this to what you just said. In one of the tutorials I took from you, you said the same thing you just said about the rear view mirror. You used a different phraseology, but you said, I think it was even the very best writer has blind spots, things they cannot see. We need other people to help us see the places that we cannot see.
Mhm.
So thank you. And my question for you, Rita, is your chronology. You touched on this at the very beginning of our time together, but I'm curious, how many years ago, when did the idea just to do this, the idea, when did it land on you? When did you actually start working on it? Did you take long breaks? A kind of a tidy chronology. I know that's asking a lot, but I'm curious.
Sure, I'll try my best. So again, I've known about this person, this historical figure, since I was a kid, but I don't think I really had an idea to write a novel about her until I was in my mid 30s, so this was around like 2018, 2019, something like that. Like it just hadn't occurred to me that I could write a novel about her. And then I started drafting in, let's say, 2019. And that, and it was stalled for a while because my mother was diagnosed with cancer. We think she's okay now, but that obviously took a lot of time away from working on the book. And then I picked it back up, maybe a year or so later. And then I was done drafting it, I want to say by the end of 2020, at which point it went to Michelle. We worked on it for another year and a half or so, and then it went out on submission. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's actually very fast for a first novel.
I think part of it is because I had been thinking about her for decades. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't realize that it was a story, but like I was thinking about her, and so I was like, oh, I actually think I know who she is, and that made it
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. Do you think our MFA helped as well?
No, I mean I love my MFA, but I worked on only short fiction during my MFA, and so like I didn't actually get to workshop, any of the novel or anything. I was workshopping my short stories. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. Anyways, well, I think I must be very, very slow. I've been working on my memoir for like 5 years, and it seems that, there's a certain point. I workshop those beginning pages twice at Breadloaf, one at Sewanee, and you keep kind of polishing those first pages. But is it better to just finish it and then go back and revise? What are your thoughts on that, please? And you get all
Yes.
the different input, even from like a Big Five editor who requested, who actually had seen pages. You get these top notes. How much, people say, I guess I have too many voices. Your thoughts?
Okay, so first of all, 5 years is not too long to work on a memoir. I have a friend who, Grace Lopersad, who has
Yes.
been working on this book for 20. Okay, so her memoir took 20 years. Okay,
Yeah.
so but obviously, every writer has a different process. For me personally, I prefer finishing the first draft before I start sending pages out for other people, because I find that it's a little bit like a seedling. Do you know what I mean? Like you kind of have to protect that seedling from like wind and sun and all of the environmental. Like when it's if you've only got like 50 pages, like, it can be too easily destroyed or altered by the environment. Whereas for me personally, after you have a full draft, now you're like, okay, I have a pretty good sense of what the shape of this thing is. Now it's going to be a good time for other people to weigh in on, So, but obviously, you got to do what works for you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Sorry, Yvonne, I didn't see you for some reason. I
No
remembered that there was a hand up and I just
worry.
could not find
Don't
it.
worry.
Karen? Karen Fitzgerald, your hand's up again?
Yes. Yes, it's up again. In relationship to that process, when you say you get out your first draft, does your process by any chance include editing your own self to your sense of perfection, or do you just whip it out and send it, or in this case, just this is it, it's the first draft, I know it's crappy, I'll just send it, and something like that?
So again, I think I have friends who do it the second way. I can't stop myself from editing as I go. I have a very, very hard time. Like if I know something isn't working, I tend to get very psychologically stuck on it, and then I have to kind of keep reworking it until maybe not perfect, but until I feel like, okay, I can move on without having 30% of my attention focused on back there. So I do edit as I go along. However, there is, I think, an argument to be made for the other model, the other strategy of just, it doesn't matter if it's terrible, it's the first draft, let's just get it out. So, play with it. Figure out what works for you.
I'm struggling with those questions myself, is why I always feel like I don't want it to go anywhere until I'm satisfied. And to Shirin's point, I'd be certainly willing to have people see what I'm not seeing. I mean, that just enhances the creative process, I think, especially if I'm coming forward thinking I'm satisfied. Anyway, thank you. Thank you so much.
Karen, again, I'm going to jump in on yours, your question with a thought, and that is when you say, send out this draft, it really depends a lot on also on where you're sending it, right? So if you're not agented, if by sending it out you mean send it out, querying for trying to get representation, I would never ever let that out of my sight unless there wasn't a period or a comma in it that I would not, that I didn't have tied down because it's just so competitive right now. But if you mean you have a group of close beta readers, your writers group, and should you let it loose to your friends so that they can give you some feedback, then yeah, I have a lot of writing friends who absolutely swear by the crappy first draft model and send it to their close group of beta readers, just as soon as they've completed it. I myself, I'm like Rita, and not just like Rita, by the way. Rita, we're in great company with Zadie Smith, who Zadie Smith says that she writes two sentences, she comes back and polishes, and then she'll lay down another sentence and come back and polish and yeah, and so I'm kind of like a scrubber writer. I kind of go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But be careful because it depends on who you're sending it to. If you're sending it to people that you trust, then yes, but if you're sending it out to an agent, it's way too competitive. Once you have an agent, if you have a really good relationship with your agent, they can absolutely be safe hands for a crappy first draft, but not when you're actually trying to get bought. A lot of people have said to me, new writers have said to me, oh, well, the agent's going to change it anyway, the editor's going to change it anyway, so why do I spend so much time finalizing it? It's because in spending that time, even though that's not going to be the final book, yes, people are going to come and have suggestions. It's at least of that standard, the higher standard. And you need every little increment that you can get.
Thank you
Monica,
so much.
Monica, you have a question?
Yeah, I have another one. You write short stories and novels. How do you decide if it's going to be a short story or a novel, and what are for you the differences? What do you like, not like? How do you sort of approach the differences? And I'll also ask, because I'm writing linked short stories, have you ever thought about doing that? The linked short stories.
So the last one is the easiest answer, which is no, because my short stories tend to be about very different. Like they don't share like a common thematic core enough for me to be able to make them linked. But I'm gonna steal something that I once heard from a fellow writer friend of mine about the difference between a short story and a novel. She said that she described it as a short story is kind of like a if you have like a very grimy window and there's only this one tiny spot in the middle that's clear and you can see through that little spot. That's a short story. And a novel is when you wipe away the rest of the grime, and now you can see the entire larger, you can see through the entire full window. And I love that analogy. And so I'm gonna, I'm sharing that with you all now. That's kind of how I feel about it. Like I think the reason this pirate thing always felt like a novel is because I was like, there's no way you can show this entire world through this one tiny little bolt hole. Like you have to have that entire window clear. Whereas I think sometimes when I'm working on a short story, it's like I have an idea and I'm like, okay, we don't need people to see the whole thing. We just want them to see like this little moment in this person's life, or this little event that happened to this particular character. So I think over time I just developed a kind of an instinct about this feels like a novel versus this feels like a short. And to be fair, like I've heard writers say that sometimes they set out thinking that something is one thing, and it ends up being an entirely different thing. So I think that that also does happen, but that hasn't happened to me yet.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Have we come to the end of the questions for the evening? Nobody? All right, what I'm going to do.
I can add something real quick if you want.
Okay, Lynn.
Yeah, sure. Since there's time, I'm curious back to like the social media piece. Being like a traditionally published author versus somebody who may be hybrid or indie. Do you feel like that? Were you surprised at all by how much that you were expected, or were you expected to do a lot of your own like social media stuff, or was there help with that? Like what role did that play in launching your book?
So my publisher was very kind in that they didn't make me do any social media. You know, certainly I think they were not against my using social media to try to promote the book, but they, you know, they weren't like, because I've heard people tell horror stories about like the publisher saying to them like you have to have a platform, and so they didn't do any of that. What generally happened was that they had their own, they have a social media coordinator who is, you know, way better at their job than I would ever be on social media. So they entrusted their social media outreach to that particular coordinator. And then they basically said to me, you can do whatever you want on your own social media as long as it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like they didn't want me to say anything that would obviously detract from the book, but they were pretty loosey-goosey about it. And so it was I would say, very mildly coordinated social media process.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
And Yvonne, you have another question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I'm lucky I'm already agented, and I'm wondering how important is it to have on your resume, because I don't have an MFA or an English degree, that say you get into Yaddo, you do MacDowell, or you do contests, things like that. Do those really matter or move the needle in any way, shape, or form?
This is my personal opinion, so you're going to have to ask other writers to see how they feel about this. I think that those things can help in terms of helping you get an agent, and in terms of helping you establish some kind of credentialing for yourself out there.
Right.
But in terms of whether a publisher actually wants to buy the book, or in terms of whether the general readership wants to buy the book, I personally don't think it makes a huge difference. Do you know what I mean? It's helpful for agenting, but you already have an agent, because the agent's like, okay, this is somebody I'm gonna have to read more carefully. Do you know what I mean? Right. But I don't think a reader has ever walked into a bookstore, picked up and said, ooh, MacDowell. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that, but like, so yeah.
Great. Perfect. Thank you so much.
I actually agree with you, Rita. I'm just wondering whether maybe there's an exception for like the highly literary novels where,
Yes.
you know, where you might go, ooh, you know, Tin
Okay.
House 2026.
Yeah, that is a good point. If you are gunning for that National Book Award, right, or something like that, like that reader, yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, so before we let Rita go quickly, and we are just about on time, I'm going to actually unspotlight us so we can see the whole room together, because I'd like everyone to take their mics off so that we can give Rita a great big round of applause for being with us tonight. So, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brava.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rita. Thank you for coming and for being so open and answering all our questions. And it's personally, I got a lot out of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for having me, Shirin. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
I hope to keep in touch. Bye.